Hello everybody, Disciple here with Overwatch Curios. So, developing a new character for any game can take a considerable amount of time and effort from the original point of concept to the end result of having a completed character. For Overwatch, balancing and adjusting both the numerical values of things like health, armor, and shields can be just as difficult as getting the right damage values or healing values for any ability a new hero might have. Many times a character comes out of the gate with a strong idea of the role they'll play in the game and the abilities they'll have to allow them to do that. But sometimes not all of those abilities or original concepts will make it to the final version of that hero. Sometimes abilities may be overpowered, or sometimes they may just not fit with the intended niche of a particular hero, and because of this, the process of hero development requires tons of time put into playtesting before the development team can figure out the perfect spot or role for a hero. Today we'll be taking another look at some scrapped abilities for heroes in the game that, for one reason or another, didn't necessarily fit with the creative vision of the developers and ended up being removed from the game before the hero ever even made it to the public. So the initial concepts for Zenyatta focused all of his kit around the usage of orbs, which is basically the same as his kit today. However, several of these initial concepts don't really match up with what is in the game for the Omnic Monk now. One of these abilities, codenamed Buddy Orb, has seemingly no relation to the Discord Orb of today. In fact, in his initial concepts, the idea of Discord Orb wasn't even included in his description. So what exactly could Buddy Orb have been? Now at first glance you'd think it'd be a codename for the healing effect that Zenyatta has now on Orb of Harmony, but if we look closer at this image from Blizzard's Overwatch Museum, we can see that he already has a heal orb listed as an ability. Now, one possible option is that the original concept for Zenyatta involved him slinging orbs of healing at allies, much like he churns out the damage in-game today, and Buddy Orb was an additional heal, which probably worked much like Orb of Harmony does now. Now, it's crazy to think of just how much healing Zenyatta could do if he were able to place both a heal over time orb on his allies, as well as heal them directly with his attacks like Ana, so there's another option that seems much more likely and might fit in with him thematically. Maybe this scrapped Buddy Orb provided some sort of damage reduction or damage mitigation effect to the target, which would create a whole new dynamic and playstyle for Zenyatta. Imagine juggling both a heal over time orb as well as an orb that could reduce damage taken by the target. It'd certainly make him insanely effective with tanks in the same way that he's effective against tanks in the current meta, since although his Harmony Orb might not be super useful for a tank since they need more healing than what he can provide passively, being able to negate damage they're taking while also restoring health to someone else elsewhere on the map while they're diving onto the back lines could be pretty insane. Now this could have changed him in a really awesome way in which you're constantly deciding who needs to be healed and who needs the damage reduction since they might not be the same targets. Of course, you could probably place them both on the same hero to save someone at a critical point, but otherwise you'd have to micromanage and balance the usage of these orbs for maximum value. However, in the end, I feel like they created a much more dynamic playstyle for him by going with the yin and yang theme, giving him the healing and also the damage from the Discord Orb. Now the second ability we see here is labeled AoE Orb, which is possibly just an early production name for what would eventually become Transcendence in-game today. However, there's also the chance that originally in development, Zenyatta was much more potent as a sustained healer throughout the match, and this ultimate could have possibly been offensive, dealing area of effect damage to enemies instead. It's hard to judge simply based off of that name, but having a support character with high healing throughput but an ultimate that could push out some serious damage could be a pretty fun mechanic for support players, and you could even say that Moira was a step in that direction, even though the damage of her ultimate itself isn't that high. And a Zenyatta ultimate that both healed allies and damaged enemies, maybe one where he had to stay in the same place, could actually be really cool and interesting and would definitely fit with his theme. Now, the next scrapped ability on our list comes to us from one of Overwatch's most hated, or most beloved members of Talon, and a character with a huge impact on the game, Widowmaker. Following the formula of many of these other hero concepts that we've seen, there's a pretty clear trend of 2 additional abilities, as well as the third ability that's being listed as an ultimate of some sort. So what's interesting about Widowmaker's initial concept is that originally her recon visor wasn't intended to be her ultimate, but was instead just one of her general abilities with a cooldown that she could use whenever it was available. That's probably nightmare fuel thinking of it now, but this early form of her recon visor probably had a much shorter active duration or range, or could even only affect a certain area or targets, almost like Hanzo's sonic arrow is today. While the ability itself wasn't scrapped entirely, what we see listed here as her ultimate was, and it sounds super dangerous today. Napalm Call Down, as it's called immediately, makes you think of some sort of aerial ship or device flying overhead and dropping this flaming substance over an area. And obviously this didn't make its way to the final version of Widowmaker. It's still crazy to think of how differently this could have changed the way Widow plays today. Currently, Widowmaker controls areas purely by setting up line of sights from vantage points where it's hard for enemy teams to contest her. If she gets too close to the action, she's vulnerable to being attacked and dying quickly. However, giving her the option to call down napalm and control areas could completely change her gameplay. The ultimate could have been used defensively to save herself from flankers and chase them away, but a targeted ability like this could just as easily be used to control where exactly the enemy team positions, making it much easier for her to combo this area control with the likes of her recon visor and go for multiple kills on enemies who are now stuck in place. There's probably a good reason why this ability was removed and possibly reworked into the much more tame version of her Venom Mine today, but we're still really looking forward to a character that can use fire to control areas, and hopefully we get to see some sort of successor or homage to this ability one day in the future with a new hero. As we move on to our next scrapped ability, we see some parallels to our first hero from the video, Zenyatta, and it really expands on some of those ideas and thoughts we had of him too. In her earliest design, Symetra, who the team referred to as the Technomancer before actually naming her, had an ability called Healing Orbs, which placed a heal over time effect on the target. In the concept art, you can even see the orbs she controls, which look very similar to the orbs that Zenyatta uses in combat today. This provides further support to the thoughts of Zenyatta possibly having direct healing for his teammates at one point in time, with him maybe being able to shoot allies to heal them instead of dealing damage as he does now. Possibly more interesting than that though is the fact that she also wielded two guns early on, one of those being the Arc Wielder, which was probably much like the gun she has today, and the other being called the Blaster, and it looks a lot more like Lucio's gun in the concept art. This means that the first versions of Symetra gave her the option to potentially heal her teammates as well as the same destructive combat potential she has now, and maybe even more so depending on what exactly her secondary weapon, the Blaster, might have done in-game. Another ironic note here is that her ultimate ability is listed as Shield Generator. While this isn't a new ability for Symetra, it was definitely scrapped from the original concepts and wasn't brought back until her rework. When she was originally released, instead of being able to choose between placing a teleporter or the shield generator, Symetra's only ult was the teleporter. She had the option to apply shields to teammates with a passive buff that gave everyone shields until they died, but the original concept shows us that there wasn't really a plan to add the teleporter into the game, and instead her first ultimate was probably a variation of her shield generator option that she has today. After testing, they might have realized just how devastating it could be to give us support damage, healing, and the option to apply shields, and would be forced to tone down on some of these effects, explaining why Symetra has always been classified as a support, despite being the only character in the role who can't provide any healing to her teammates. It's also interesting to note that it seems like Symetra was created much more for her character, and that the aspect of having a teleporter in the game was actually added as a secondary thought, even though it seems like having the teleporter in a game is pretty huge. From seeing these original abilities and the way that they've changed over time, you can really see how all of these characters might have developed, either being based around their playstyles, their specific abilities, or just their characters and sort of the idea they have in the lore. While Zenyatta was always going to be a balance between healing and damage, Symetra seemed to just be some sort of advanced support, and they wanted to give her whatever abilities they could make to make that work in the overall theme of the game. Overall, I feel like they've done a pretty awesome job of doing it and creating this awesome fantasy of each character being a part of the Overwatch world while also being a functional part of the Overwatch meta in the game that we're playing now. Obviously, I love Overwatch's design and I could talk about it forever, and we're probably going to do that in all of our future videos, so if you're not subscribed, make sure you do that. Out of all the abilities in the list, which would you like to see added either to the hero who originally had it, or to a new hero in the future? And if you had to remove one ability from the current heroes in place, which would you choose? Make sure to let us know in the comments section below, and of course, hit that like button if you haven't already. Anyway, until the next video, peace.